Welcome to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Here's your host, Tim Wilkins.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. And today's edition of the podcast is one of the most hilarious topics that I think any conservative can talk about. And that is the who in the blue hell is going to win the 2023 primary or 2024 primary, excuse me. And on top of that, I'm joined by the co-host of co-host, Chris, joining me once again. But I will be remiss if we don't talk about a really awesome topic to kick off the show, Chris. Do you know what that is?
I think I might have a hint of what we're going to talk about.
The Beetlejuice of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, has lost her re-election campaign to two dumbasses that can't figure out whether or not they want to reinvent the police or fund the police. So, the first time, by the way, in 40 years, the mayor of Chicago has lost a re-election campaign. It is by far one of the greatest topic choices that we can think of in the modern era to start a podcast topic with. Chris, I don't know about you, but I appreciate you joining me as always. Hope you had a great weekend. There is so much to talk about. On top of many things that are going on, the conservative things like, hell, we've been proven right. Tom Cotton's getting proven right. Tony Fauci needs to get his pension pulled. But Chris, I think Lori Lightfoot's a great topic starter to start the podcast off with. If you want to trample on some liberals, just make fun of her some more. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. No, to use the O.J. Simpson quote or paraphrase it, the Beetlejuice is not loose anymore. So definitely, certainly things in Chicago can't get much worse than they already were. Under her tenure as mayor, I mean, obviously the number of shootings, homicides, just absolutely insane. One of the great cities in America. And we could talk more about the decay of our major metropolitan cities, but I think no city has really fallen further than the city of Chicago, really under Democrat leadership for 100 plus years unabated. But yeah, definitely good to see that the voters in Chicago have had enough of her. I mean, that's not to say any of the other candidates, the two remaining candidates that are in the runoff, are any more, let's say, centrist, or can hopefully can bring some normalcy back to the city of Chicago. But definitely, really a black eye on the city is no longer. And of course, on her way out, she of course had to drop the R word, and because she's a woman. So the usual tired talking points of when something doesn't go your way, you just blame it on your skin color and on your gender.
I think honestly, what we're going to talk about here is other than the ass whooping that she received in the voting tally. I believe good old Jim Ross said it, stomping a mud hole and walking it dry. The electorate basically of the great city of Chicago basically said, hell nah to the nah, all hell to the nah, and got rid of her. And I'm going to talk about this now because it's really important, is that it's going to a runoff in April. And there's two candidates that are running for basically the mayoralship of one of the greatest cities in the country. I'm not being funny about that. Chicago has a lot of culture, has a lot of great things about it, including its crappy pizza, which we on this podcast have debated the mini pizza conversation. But the one thing that is unfortunate about the city of Chicago is that it has the highest murder rate per capita in the nation. And unfortunately, nothing was being done. So the citizens of Chicago said something's got to go, and unfortunately, the mayor's got to go. So the opportunity here is that the two candidates that are running, Chris, I'm not sure if you've seen any of these two guys. One is endorsed by the school boards and the school. Paul Vallas is a former CEO of the Chicago schools. Will face Brandon Johnson, who is a Cook County commissioner, but he's endorsed by the Chicago Teachers Union. So I believe South Park had a great analogy that rings true to a lot of great things. And I by the way, I am a full-blown supporter of the boys have created South Park because of the satire that they have and the parody that they do for the life and the culture of this country. But it is the turd or shit sandwich right now. And it is the douche. I'm sorry, it's douche or turd sandwich. And that's the correct analogy that they use. And there is nothing good about this. But at the same time, the electorate said anybody was better than what they had. So there is one candidate here that I think sincerely has to reevaluate his entire thought on life. I believe it's Mr. Johnson, has a thought that he needs to reimagine the police, and he wants to reappropriate funds that were supposed to go to the police into social services to get down to the cause or root cause.
The root cause.
Problem.
Yeah.
And I got what's next? We're gonna have Kamala Harris come out here with some Venn diagrams, Chris. I mean, seriously.
And she'll talk about
we're gonna have some
we're
gonna have some cackling and talking about some buses.
Yeah.
This is stupid. That's not gonna solve anything. You know what's gonna solve some problems? Hiring some more police. In investing in the budget of the police. Investing in the training of the officers. But, what do we know? We just, we're just a bunch of conservatives that grew up in probably one of the murder capitals in the freaking state of Connecticut. But, New Haven and Bridgeport, Connecticut. We're just two of the finest. All right. So.
But I think, this is part of, and I mean, I know we move on another topic, but I think it's part of a larger conversation that we're seeing. Even, and again, these are obviously two heavily flawed candidates. I mean, there's, again, it's not like we are, we're seeing a David Dinkins to Rudy Giuliani in New York back in the 90s. We're seeing basically, one horrible mayor and then two bought and paid for teachers union, sellouts essentially. But I think it's part of a larger conversation that the electorate, even though they still don't know what's the best for them and the best for their fellow citizens, that you are seeing them say, listen, this is too much. I mean, if you look at what we saw in New York with de Blasio, granted he was termed out, but you had de Blasio, and then granted Eric Adams has been no better, but there was a thought of, okay, Eric Adams is a little bit more of a move to the right candidate compared to what de Blasio was. You look at out in Los Angeles with, unfortunately, she ended up winning, but somehow, in quotation marks, winning. But Karen Bass, the former mayor there, they had a more centrist.
Yeah, we all know why Karen Bass won that race. You have
a more centrist. You had a more centrist in Caruso out there, who I think a lot of people thought even a lot of Hollywood types were endorsing him. Something else that just came out in the last couple of days down there in Atlanta, the Buckhead area of Atlanta, which is the northern part of it, the more affluent part of Atlanta, that was really being overrun by crime and gangs, but was essentially still on the whim because it was connected to Atlanta and to the Atlanta metro area. Just said, hey, well, we're done with Atlanta. Now we basically are going to make our own government, and we're going to be governed by ourselves and not be governed by the crazy lunatics in Atlanta. So in a way, I mean, I think we're seeing moves. It's not it's not going to happen overnight, but we are seeing moves in some of these major metropolitan cities that people are slowly, and again, very, very slowly, are getting fed up and tired with what is going on in those cities.
All right, so I'm not sure if you knew the stats of this electorate here. As of Tuesday evening, which I'm assuming by this morning, but all the ballots were counted. It wasn't like one of those, hey, we got to wait 2 weeks to figure out who won. Like every other liberal race. It's great when the liberal race is up for grabs, they know who won the race real quick. But when it comes to if there's a conservative in the election, they got to wait 2 weeks to see how many votes they need to steal and before they actually figure out who wins. But so figure out this. They have Mr. Vallis, who is by the way, his stance, Chris, on this is he's a hard on crime candidate. He's more in favor of the crime, putting more police on the street and being a hard on crime stance. And he had the fraternity order of police is not endorsement and things along those lines. But so this give you an idea here. He wins. Mr. Vallis had 34% of the vote. Probably has more now as of this reading of this podcast. Mr. Johnson had 20%, and Beetlejuice of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, had 17%. So figure this out, is that a woman that pretty much swept the entire city. Okay. Swept the city. She literally won every single ward in the city by a large margin 4 years ago. Did not win this time. So it paves the way. It paves, sir. It paves to actually do your job well. Pete Buttigieg didn't do his job very well, but he got a nice corporate job. Not a corporate job, but a nice federal job, and he can't even do that well. So maybe Beetlejuice of Chicago has a nice federal job paid out for her sometime. Maybe being like the Secretary of Agriculture or something. Who knows? Joe Biden looks hiring losers. So that being said, we're going to transition over to a very good topic, Chris. I think the secondary topic is the most important topic. The entire reason why we do this podcast today is so far we have 3 candidates, maybe 4, maybe 5. Who knows? It is Wednesday evening. Hell, we might have 3 more candidates announce they're going to run for president. Who knows? It is presidential primary season, better known as the roulette wheel of greatness. Who in the world will win the 2024 GOP primary? And I already know who's going to win. I think you know who's going to win. Just going to take some time to figure it out and get your head wrapped around it. But we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, so far we have Donald Trump, former president, number 45, Nikki Haley, and a CEO of a hedge fund. And we have not heard anything from Mr. Ron DeSantis. We have not heard anything from Mr. Mike Pompeo. We have not heard anything from Larry Hogan, Governor Chris Sununu, or Kristi Noem. Darn it. Was she announced already? But Chris, who in the world would you like to win the GOP nomination? That's the best question. If we could do a whole podcast topic on who can win the nomination, that would be a phenomenal topic, which we will do once we actually have a full set field. At this point, we only got 3 or 4 people. So it's like basically throwing darts at a dartboard and figuring it out. But I think so far, man, one topic, I want to get your thoughts and views on so far the first 4 people that I have announced, and I'll let you go. Let you be free hand.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room is President Trump, obviously.
Hey, is that a fat joke, sir?
That is not a fat joke. That is not a fat joke. But yes, President Trump obviously announced he will try and regain the office that was taken from him.
45, 47.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, obviously right now he is the head and shoulders favorite to win the nomination. All roads lead that Ron DeSantis will be running in 2024.
Fake news.
So we'll and there's obviously been a little bit of of President Trump giving Governor DeSantis the bumper. And as I've said before, yes, it is possible to like both President Trump and Governor DeSantis. Like to me, I'm not a DeSantis, you know, I'm not a never Trumper or a never DeSantis guy. Like
I don't think you
ultimately
can be as a conservative. I doubt you
no,
can be.
no, they're both they both are fighting. They both have their eyes keen set on what is going on in the culture wars. I think President Trump, obviously, I think is stronger on foreign policy just based on obviously what he did when in his time in the when he was in the Oval Office, and when you look at what Governor DeSantis has done with Florida, taking on the woke culture and the diversity movements of businesses in Florida, especially with Disney. I mean, he's fearless. So no, to me, I don't look at these guys and say ultimately the vote the GOP voters will vote who is the best candidate, and if it is indeed if it is whether it's President Trump or Governor DeSantis, we'll ultimately see what happens. In terms of the other two announced candidates, Nikki Haley, I mean, obviously she's the epitome of the establishment. I don't think she might be lucky to get 2 or 3% of the electorate. She obviously was in the Trump administration. Um, with the UN, but I mean, just your run-of-the-mill Republican. Nothing too much.
Sorry, she turned her back on the administration. Sorry.
Yep.
That is the
So,
she left. She took her ball and went home halfway through the presidency, and I understand President Trump. I'm not gonna really take it personal type stance that he did, but at the same point, he said, "Do what your heart tells you to do." You're not gonna. I know what he's thinking, and I think Chris, you do too. She ain't gonna pull more than 1%. So why the hell am I gonna tell her not to? And so, in my personal view, the more people that enter the race, it favors Trump. As it favors Trump. Unfortunately, the RNC, which is this is a big topic of conversation now amongst conservatives, is what the RNC has done to change their rules. And going into the primary season to pretty much cater to the strongest, I would say 4, possibly 2, is that other than the primary debate pledge, which, by the way, you can read all this news as well, the RNC is making every presidential candidate, primary candidate, actually take the pledge that says they will actually support whoever is the nominee before they step on foot on that stage. And the first debate has already been set for Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm not sure the date yet, but it's the 10th. They set the venue already. And the other rule change that's really, really fascinating to me that I need to get to the bottom of is, I believe it's the top 2 campaigns that have the most funding will be supported heavily down the road. I forgot the exact rules that they're doing, but they're pretty much catering to the top 2 candidates. And then once it gets to like Super Tuesday, when it comes to that, and I don't know about you, Chris, but I think it kind of goes down to the 2 juggernauts, which we already know who the juggernauts are going to be. I think realistically, I don't think another candidate's going to come along and do what Trump did in 2015 and basically pimp slap the shit out of Jeb Bush and Ted Cruz and take over the nomination. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I think it's going to be difficult. As I think I even mentioned before, back when President Trump first announced he was running, it's going to be a challenge for, I think, any of these candidates to find lightning in a bottle twice. I think that was such an anomaly. But I truly do believe, President Trump, obviously, everything he said that was going to happen under the leadership, under this regime has happened. Now the question will be,
and that's a very scary. I'll say, Chris, that's probably the scariest thing that a lot of liberals, even people that are moderates and independents, they thought he was blowing smoke up their ass. like, oh yeah, he's just being pissed off and stuff. But like everything that he said was going to happen has happened. I mean, everything from top to bottom, foreign policy, domestic policy, every single thing. And the guy, Chris, I think you can attest to this. Whoever the GOP nominee is going to be, it's just going to club. Joe Biden has to go out of the campaign trail. They're going to force him out like the freaking great. It's not going to be Groundhog Day where they leave him inside his little bunker. No. You're going to come out and play. And he's not going to enjoy that ass whooping. I'm telling you. I don't mean talk bad about the president of the United States, but that boy is going to take him around for a lap. A Days of Thunder analogy come to play. Hit the pace car. Because it's going to be, I'm telling you, that you think, I think we both watched Mike Pence debate Kamala Harris. And just, it was like all the memes that came out with his clubbing people. It was just great. But I think whoever wins the GOP nominee, the country will be in better hands with a conservative president. There's no doubt about it. The party, unfortunately, Chris, I think needs to get their head so far out their own ass and get going. I mean, it's bad. Trump can only do so much. DeSantis can only do so much. These policies that they're talking about implementing, which I think, Chris, I think you heard Trump. He has come out pretty good on social media between True Social and everything else on the hard on China policies, a lot of different things that he has stance on. I know some of us we have heard these things before, but they might be new to some people. But I think Trump now isn't sounding so windbaggish, is a nice way to put it. He sounds very crisp on foreign policy now. And that's something that Ron DeSantis, he's lacking. But at the same time, I don't think people are going to really listen to all the lack of foreign policy chops, because we had Barack Obama, who was a senator who didn't have any foreign policy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think there's no doubt about it. I mean, obviously, again, Trump had never held public office. I mean, this guy, he literally went from businessman, reality star, all the above to the president of the United States. I mean, that is insane in and of itself. But what he was able to accomplish in 4 years with people backstabbing him, with people working behind his back, heck, even some family members. Right? We know for sure some family members. He wasn't really given a fair shake. We talk about the first 100 days, the vacation they call it, or the honeymoon that they call it for the president. He was never given that. I mean, within 5 or 6 hours after he was inaugurated, they were already talking about impeaching the guy. I mean, this man was never given a fair shake as the president of the United States. So we don't know what he could have accomplished. We don't know how. All we know is the accomplishment.
And you forget one big thing too. You forget the China virus. And if you eliminate the China virus from his presidency, what would have happened? And
exactly.
I'm sorry for all you listeners out there, but it's not racist to say the China virus, because we're just stating a simple fact where it came from. China.
And it came from.
If you don't believe me.
Yep. Now the New York Times has finally come around and said that it might have come out of a lab in Wuhan.
I don't get how, and this is seriously stupid. I don't get how a senator from Arkansas called it out. You got Rand Paul basically calling out Tony Fauci for almost 2 years, and he got pretty much shunned publicly, for all the stuff that he said. And now he's being basically proven right. And Tom Cotton doesn't want a pat on the back. He just wants it squared away. He said it on Fox and Friends in the morning. He doesn't want no pat on the back. He wants to get to the bottom of it. He wants to prove it's not fair what happened. And I think what's going to happen though, Chris, this is kind of a not off topic here, but it's Trump is going to have to defend his reaction to COVID. And I don't think he's going to like to do that. I understand people don't want to think about this, but a lot of things that happened in this country was because he was going based on the information that he was given. That's if he was a logical, unemotional person, that's a political statement. I was doing what I was given the best information at the time. However, knowing what we know now, hindsight is what it is. We can't Monday morning quarterback this. Trump's going to have to take it on the chin a little bit because DeSantis as well. DeSantis did. There is some videos out there, and Laura Loomer has posted these on Twitter of him actually, talking about shutdowns and pushing the vaccine and things like that. So there is, I would call it, not enemy combatant territory here when it comes to, what do you want to call it? Op-ed research is a nice way of putting it. There is that kind of stuff out there. It's just the GOP is going to have to take some kind of ownership of our COVID response a little bit because a lot of people are on the hook for it, dude. I mean, I don't know about you, but did I approve of everything that Trump was talking about? No. But at the same time, he did what he thought was right. Was it perfect? I don't think so. It's proven not to be. But that's the thing I think is going to affect him as a person because he has to go against his own policies in that situation. It's going to be something that, and I think DeSantis will hammer him for a lot of other things. I really don't see how, and this is where I know we talked about it DeSantis being the nominee. I brought this up many, many times. I don't see how I think if you look at the details, the stats on the paper, does it all work well for DeSantis? Absolutely. Age, young president, which a lot of people are craving. 2, very, very opinionated. He's a culture warrior as you can get. Very in tune to the party. The thing that's kind of going to hurt him is a lot of the hard conservatives don't really know who he's going to pick for VP if he wins. If he picks Nikki Haley or, some rhino, then we got problems. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so Trump, we know what we're getting. We already know this man. There is no unmitigating factors that are going to impede our knowing of what we're going to get. He might be a little tamer now. Who knows? I think he's actually changed a little bit for the better for certain things. I think a lot of things that he's doing now in his personal life with True Social, and I know obviously he lives in Mar-a-Lago and everything else. He's had some time to reflect on what he did. And I think if you ask him personally if he can go back and do some things over, either with cabinet or with other things, there's some things he probably could have done differently. But you got to give the man a shot. Let him try to make it right. That's just my view. Let the man make him right. And I think DeSantis will be the candidate either sooner rather than later. I mean, I see his future very bright in the party. Chris, I think you can agree. If he doesn't win the primary here, he's got it locked up in 28. It's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. No, we'll have to get one more candidate to touch on. But kind of finishing this conversation, I do think it will be interesting to see where their positioning continues to be. I thought obviously President Trump, and again, we know politicians, they if there's a crisis, they can position themselves. And I think President Trump did a tremendous job in positioning himself by going up to Ohio there and bringing relief out of his own pocket, and that was good. That was good. But it'll be interesting to see what happens here over the next few months. And I think this will obviously be a conversation we can come back to several times throughout the remainder of this year, and then looking towards obviously next year with the presidential election. But one last candidate that obviously did announce he is running. again, not a very well-known name, unless you do watch a lot of cable news, but definitely a young guy. He's charismatic as well, but just in obviously name recognition. But I tend to believe he's looking for more of a cabinet position is Vivek Ramaswamy. You've probably seen him quite a bit on Tucker Carlson. He has a good instep into the culture wars. He talks a lot about this whole ESG movement, basically the woke movement that we're seeing in these corporations, where these through the environmental, social governance, basically a social credit score for business. But he's been very in tune with that. Again, he has a lot of candor. I believe his parents are immigrants from India. He's Ivy League educated, very, very smart guy. But again, he's probably not even going to be a 1% guy. But I think in terms of in a Republican-led administration, a guy like him could have, in terms of his business sense and savvy, could definitely have a place in a prominent cabinet role for sure.
I think, unfortunately for him, he sounds too much like the other candidates in the room. And so his name recognition, unfortunately, you're right. His name recognition isn't quite there. But the problem that you have as well with him is, where do you see the path? Where do so you don't enter, and I hate to say this to a lot of people, and I do. I think he's doing the right thing by entering himself in the race. Is it a issue that he wants to campaign on? Okay, cool. Culture war. Okay. The thing is, you got two of the biggest candidates in the party are superstars in that situation. So where do you navigate yourself around them to kind of carve your way out a little bit of a percentage or two, or 5 or 6 or 7 to get to that point? I think you're right. I think he's going to carve himself into a cabinet position. I'm sorry, but Larry Kudlow is a gem, and he's a Rhodes Scholar. He's who I love to listen to every day on business, on the Fox Business Channel. And if you don't like listening to him, he's a very intelligent person. Before he got into Trump's administration, listened to him all the time beforehand too. That's why Larry Kudlow is phenomenal. And I'm sorry, but you're not getting a job that he had before. He might get like a maybe Secretary of the Treasury or something stupid, but I'm not saying the Treasury is stupid, but I'm just saying in general, there's a lot of cabinet positions that over the years, Chris, I think you can agree with me on this, have, including this administration, that have gone to people that are not qualified to get it. And we're seeing that the lack of leadership pays dividends over time. I'm not going to kick a dead horse in the mouth because I'm tired of it. But as working in logistics for a living, seeing the transportation secretary just not have a freaking clue what he's talking about every single time he gets to a podium. And I'm not going to get on my soapbox right now, but it needs to get on one here. Pete Buttigieg needs to resign or just go home. Trump going, you talked about it, Chris. You talked about Trump going to, East Palestine, Ohio. He didn't have to do that. Okay, I'm not talking about a campaign stop. He shouldn't even had to do that. The administration lack of leadership, including in the cabinet secretary, the president of the United States, the vice president of the United States, all didn't go. It's a sad state of affairs when the cabinet secretary, the transportation secretary, says it's Trump's fault. Really? Do you even know your own policy regulations? You stupid moron.
When in doubt, it's Trump's fault. When in doubt, it's Trump's fault.
Do you even know your own regulation? I mean, I hate to say this, man, but I don't mean to cut you off, but he didn't even know his own regulations in his own federal Department of Transportation. Okay? They found out, by the way, it was a ball bearing issue. It was a failed ball bearing. Okay, that's what Ted Cruz came out and said, that they found this is what the issue was. It had nothing to do with said regulation or deregulation during the Trump administration. Now, I do give these senators some credit for what they're working on right now, because that's what they can do, being in a legislative body, is they're trying to work on that these rail carriers, which that's what they are, they're railroad carriers, have to declare what's on their trains, and to the local authorities. I think that's the right thing to do. I think that's surprised that it's not done already, but I think I'll be working in the industry. Rail is probably one of the, how do I put it, the fastest growing sector in the industry in the last 10 years with the use of rail. I know people think that everything gets moved by truck, but a lot of things get moved by rail. And in this case, they're talking about the chemicals. I don't mean to go on a tangent here, but Pete Buttigieg really should resign. I'm not trying to get on a soapbox about it, but he really should, for lack of competency to do the job. It's a blatantly obvious. We're not just talking about this issue with East Palestine, Ohio. We're talking about the airline industry with Southwest. Dude, we haven't had our skies in the United States have not had no airplanes in them since 9/11. And this moron, that's what I'm going to call him from now on. He's a moron. Really just can't. I believe he can manage a Porta-John better than the transportation department. But it's sad, man. And then I think going forward, not to close out this podcast here, but I think we need to close it out with this. I think the GOP is in good hands, whoever wins. And hopefully that is the man that I think will win. He will be the first president in a long time that has won off, I would say, different terms in office and become president. President Trump, I'm sorry to say this, man, got the wrong shake of the hand there, and he deserves another shot. Ron DeSantis is the future. I understand that, but the future isn't now. And the future is in 4 years when Trump cannot be, I believe the law, Chris, you might be able to better tell me this, but is it 8 years total or is it consecutively? Maybe you might be able to help me out with that.
I think it's I think once you fulfill 8 years in office, that's it. I don't think it needs to be. It doesn't matter if it's consecutive or not consecutive.
2 terms consecutive. Hold on, looking it up. Sorry. This is the life of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Passed in part by Congress in 1947, thanks to good old FDR, because he tried to run for a 3rd term during wartime. He's actually limited to president 2 terms in office, total of 8 years. But it is possible, however, for a president to serve as 10 years. So where does that say? Hold on. So let's just say hypothetically, the vice president becomes the president. He finishes out the term. Then he gets elected to 2 terms. That's 10 years. So I think overall, man, we're going to be, that's just going to be what it is. I think, honestly, I don't hate Ron DeSantis. I think a lot of people get this discredit for me not enjoying Ron DeSantis here. But, Chris, I think a lot of people, I asked a very, very simple question. What is Ron DeSantis going to do for me or a conservative outside the state of Florida that Trump can't do? What policy is Ron DeSantis going to do for people outside of Florida other that Trump can't do? And if you can answer that with seriousness, if Ron DeSantis can answer those questions, then he will be the nominee. There's no question about that. I think Trump, if his demeanor and his other things are like he was in office the first time, he will not be the primary. He will not win the primary. the voters, electorate, yes, they love him to death. The GOP, every conservative loves him. He's a great person. But the writing will be on the wall come Super Tuesday if it's versus him versus Ron DeSantis. And it's an issue of demeanor and character and age. Ron DeSantis is going to win that, Chris. I don't know about you and your thoughts on that, but I think seriously, it's gonna, if it comes down to two of those guys, it really is a Ron DeSantis show, but it has to, Ron DeSantis has to paint a narrative where he differs from Trump. If he doesn't do that, it's basically a Trump win. That's just the way I look at it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's going to be the telltale sign is how does he differentiate himself? And again, I don't want beat a dead horse, but Trump even alluded to it and said, which I about 75% agree with Trump, is that a big portion of the reason why Ron DeSantis won was because of President Trump. That's not to say after he got into office that he didn't build up his political capital, and that's why he won by 12, 13, why he won by nearly 20 or over 20 points in his reelection campaign.
Yeah, he I believe JR would say stomp a mud hole in someone's ass and walk it dry. Yep. He did that pretty good.
Won by absolutely incredible margin. And that was because obviously
there was no quality candidate, though. If the DNC put a quality candidate up there, I'm sorry, but Charlie Crist isn't really a quality candidate.
No,
but I mean, if you put him up a quality, okay, the candidate that went against Ron DeSantis the first time was a cokehead. No offense, I'm not speaking allegedly here, but it was well documented. Just saying.
Yeah,
nothing personal against the guy that ran against DeSantis, but they found cocaine in many hotel rooms. The guy had a drug problem. I'm not kicking a dead horse on that, but it's like you're going to lose that over time.
When it comes down to it, DeSantis only won by 30,000 votes in 2018. So, and President Trump was a big part of what got Ron DeSantis over the finish line. We'll never know exactly what percentage that was because of President Trump, but the fact of his endorsement obviously carried a tremendous amount of weight for any Republican candidate. So, but that's not to say now that Ron DeSantis, through what he's done in the state of Florida, doesn't have political capital. So in a way, that's where I'm like, you know what? Both of them are telling both of them are telling the truth there when it comes down to it. And politics is dirty in and of itself. It doesn't, politics is dirty.
I just think here's the lie and the problem here. The GOP, the Rhino argument is that Trump lost the Senate for them in 2020, and they lost his endorsement of Herschel Walker is what lost, the Senate in 22. Like there were some flawed candidates in 22 that had a Trump endorsement that lost. And I disagree with that argument for one simple fact. Give me somebody better. If the RNC was so wanting somebody better, they could have put the money behind the candidate during the primary season and put that as a person up for election. You talk about Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz was endorsed by Trump, endorsed by Sean Hannity, endorsed by the right. It was a supportive candidate. Still lost because he's a flawed candidate. He's not flawed in a sense of his personal reasons. He just there's I'm talking like the there's no like he's not a drug dealer. He's not narcos or anything like that. I'm talking about like he has a very iffy political, this thought process. He's not in my opinion, he's a rhino. He was a rhino. That's just what I thought. And so but at the same time, Trump's argument in that situation for Pennsylvania was, you guys didn't give me many options. So I'm going to endorse the candidate that we think we can win. Okay. Like Herschel Walker, I think op-ed research got him in there. I hate to say he lost his campaign there. Op-ed research got the whole lot of personal stuff there. and they started leaking. You started hearing, Chris. I know we're going down a tangent here, but you saw this drip, drip, drip of his personal life stuff kind of happen as the campaign kind of wore on, and it got to a point where you're like, where all this crap coming from? And it doesn't really help. So,
no, without a doubt.
That being said, man, I think we're gonna close it up here, man. We can go on this all day, but I think seriously, my pick is still gonna be Donald Trump for the GOP primary. You're probably gonna go Ron DeSantis. We're gonna meet in the middle and hedge it out. And I'm still gonna
lean towards Trump right now. But again, there's a lot of things can change over time here. But right now, even if DeSantis were to announce his candidacy tomorrow, I still think Trump is the odds-on favorite.
That being said, ladies and gentlemen, you have our picks here first, live on March 1st, 2023. If you don't like it, I got 2 words for you. That being said, Chris, appreciate you joining me as always. We'll do it again next week for another fun-filled edition of the Yankee Cowboy podcast. And, next week, let's have some fun next week. And what do you want to talk about next week? Anything good?
I don't know. We'll
discuss it. We'll discuss what we want to talk about next week.
let's keep the people on their seats.
Oh yeah, fly by the seat of their pants. That's right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, appreciate you joining me as always. Feel free to like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter. And as always, man, have a good week. Enjoy the week. Enjoy Las Vegas for all you NASCAR fans. Don't get too drunk, too stupid. And remember, NFL Combines this week as well. So,
and the XFL.
And the XFL. Make sure you like, subscribe to the XFL. All right. Take it easy, everybody.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Feel free to follow us on social media via Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.